My name is Audrey Wood. I'm 33 years old, and for 3 years, I believed I was building a life with the man I loved. Nathan Cole was charming in a quiet way. Not loud or flashy, just attentive enough to make you feel chosen. We met through mutual friends, bonded over late night conversations, and shared plans for the future. I had a stable career, a house I worked relentlessly to afford, and the kind of life that felt earned. When Nathan proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I thought love was supposed to feel like that: steady, reassuring, safe. We were 6 months into our engagement, drowning in wedding planning. Guest lists, venues, flowers. He kept calling it our future. I believed him. Then one night, everything cracked. Nathan told me he was heading out for drinks with his friends. I stayed home, catching up on work in my office. Around 9 p.m., his laptop, left open on the desk, lit up with a notification. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. But the message preview made my stomach drop. She still has no idea. It was from his group chat. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My chest tightened. My instincts screamed. I clicked. What I read didn't feel real at first, like my brain refused to process it. Nathan, I swear once the papers are signed, I'm done. Half her assets, clean exit. Brandon, bro played the long game, respect. Mara, this is cold. You sure about this? Nathan, 3 years of pretending deserves a payout. She's just a temporary wife. Temporary. Wife. My hands started shaking. Another message popped up, this one from Lily, his ex-girlfriend. Told you marrying rich was the move. I felt sick, physically sick. They joked about my house, my savings, my career, about how I was too soft to demand a prenup, about how I trusted him too easily. Nathan wrote, Audrey thinks we're a team. She has no clue what's coming. I sat there, staring at the screen as my entire reality collapsed in on itself. The man I planned to marry wasn't in love with me. He was waiting to cash out. I should have screamed. I should have confronted him the moment he walked back through that door. But instead, I smiled, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. Nathan thought he was the smartest person in the room. He had no idea he had just taught me exactly who he was, and I was done being blind. That night, when he came home, kissed my cheek, and asked how my day was, I played my role perfectly. I let him believe the lie, because the trap hadn't been set yet, and I wasn't done. Nathan slept like a man with nothing to lose. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing, like it was proof that the universe could be cruel and casual at the same time. Every time I closed my eyes, those messages flashed back. Temporary wife, half her assets. She has no idea. And my body reacted like it was poison. I didn't cry. Not yet, because crying would mean admitting I'd been fooled. And I wasn't ready to hand Nathan that victory, not even in private. By morning, I had already decided something that shocked even me. I wasn't going to confront him. Not because I was weak, because confrontation would warn him. And I needed him confident, careless, smiling. I needed him exactly the way he was in that group chat, arrogant enough to sign his own downfall. Nathan padded into the kitchen in sweatpants, wrapping his arms around my waist like he hadn't spent the previous night laughing about ruining me. Morning, babe, he murmured into my hair. My skin crawled, but my face didn't move. I turned, gave him a soft smile, and kissed his cheek. Morning. His eyes lingered on me, checking, measuring. Maybe he expected guilt, or nerves, or some intuitive feminine sixth sense he clearly didn't respect enough to fear. But I poured his coffee like normal. I asked about his plans for the day. I mentioned seating arrangements and the florist, and whether his mother would complain about the menu again. Nathan relaxed. That was the first thing I learned. The kind of people who plan betrayal rarely imagine their target is capable of strategy. They mistake kindness for stupidity. He left for work, and the second his car turned the corner, I picked up my phone and made one call. Not to a friend. Not to my mom. A lawyer. His name was Evan Pierce, and his office was downtown in a sleek building full of glass and quiet power. I chose him because his reviews had two repeating words: ruthless and precise. When I walked in, my hands were steady. I didn't feel steady, but I looked like I was. Evan sat behind a minimalist desk, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp. He didn't waste time with small talk. So, he said, leaning back slightly, tell me what's going on. I slid my phone across the desk, opened the screenshots, and watched his expression change line by line. He didn't gasp, didn't act shocked. He just nodded slowly, like he'd seen this movie before. When is the wedding? He asked. 2 months, I said. And he thinks there's no prenup. I nodded. He's counting on it. Evan laced his fingers together. Then we give him what he expects. My throat tightened. What do you mean? We draft a prenup so clean, so fair-looking, that he won't feel threatened, Evan said. But the structure will be unforgiving. I swallowed. Unforgiving how? Evan turned his monitor slightly so I could see the outline he was typing. We include clauses that protect your premarital assets, your house, your savings, your income streams, he said. That part is standard. Then we include triggers. Triggers. If he initiates divorce, Evan said calmly, he gets nothing. If he commits infidelity, he pays you. If there's proven intent to defraud you financially, he owes damages, legal fees paid by the party challenging the agreement. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears. It felt brutal. Then I remembered Nathan's message. Temporary wife. And something inside me hardened like cooled metal. Do it, I said. Evan's mouth curved slightly, not a smile, more like approval. Good. He drafted for hours while I sat there, answering questions, supplying documentation, listing assets, detailing timelines. He treated it like a surgical procedure. No emotion, no noise. But underneath my calm, I could feel something else building. Not just anger, clarity. By the end, Evan slid the draft toward me. This isn't just protection, he said. This is a trap. But he has to walk into it willingly. I know, I whispered. He won't sign if he thinks I'm serious. Evan's eyes narrowed. Then you don't act serious. I left the office with a folder tucked under my arm and an unfamiliar feeling in my chest. Control. The next part was the hardest. Going home and acting like I was still Audrey, the trusting fiancé. Nathan came home that night in a good mood, humming, loose, relaxed. He kissed me, asked what I wanted for dinner, and scrolled through his phone like his conscience was a myth. I leaned into him lightly. Actually, I said casual, my lawyer called today. His head tilted just slightly. Your lawyer? I shrugged like it was nothing. Evan, he was checking on some stuff, nothing major. Nathan's eyes sharpened for half a second. Then I laughed softly and waved my hand. Don't worry, it's boring paperwork. He watched me. What kind of paperwork? I set a plate on the counter. He said something about a prenup. Nathan froze. Not dramatically, not in a way a stranger would notice, but I noticed. His fingers paused on his phone. His jaw tightened a fraction. His eyes got just a little too still. And then, like a man slipping on a mask, he chuckled. Prenup? He repeated, light. Why? I gave him my best innocent look. Evan said it's standard. It's not like I'd ever enforce it. I let my voice soften. It's just a formality. Nathan's shoulders loosened slightly. A formality, he echoed. I nodded. He said it is what people do now, to avoid messy misunderstandings. Nathan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That was the problem with someone like him. He wasn't just greedy. He was proud. If a prenup looked like I didn't trust him, it would threaten his ego. So I gave him what he needed, reassurance that I was still blind. Over the next few days, I planted the bait. I took a phone call near the hallway when he could overhear. Evan, I said with a faint laugh, I told you, Nathan isn't after my money. This is silly. I wouldn't take anything from him, even if I could. Then I paused, listening, and added, Yes, he already agreed to sign. It's not a big deal. I could hear footsteps stop outside the office door. I kept my tone casual, almost bored. Whatever makes you lawyers happy. Silence. Then the footsteps continued. That night, Nathan brought it up himself, pretending he was relaxed. So, he said, swirling his drink like he was the one in control, about that prenup. I looked up from the couch. Oh, yeah, Evan's sending it over. It's really basic. Nathan nodded slowly. Right, basic. I made myself sound thoughtful. If it makes you uncomfortable, we can add something for you, like something small, so you feel safe. The moment those words left my mouth, I saw it. The spark. Not love, not relief, greed. Nathan leaned in just slightly. Something small? He repeated, like he was pretending to be humble. I shrugged. Maybe a small settlement if we ever split, or a trip, something symbolic. He smiled wider now. You'd do that? Of course. I touched his hand like I adored him. We're a team. Nathan squeezed my fingers. You're incredible, Audrey. I almost laughed, because I knew what he thought. He thought he'd just manipulated me into giving him a guaranteed payout. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't see behind my calm eyes, was that Evan had already built his claws into a dead end. Vague language. No enforceable amount. No clear conditions. A shiny toy with no batteries. 2 days later, the prenup arrived. I laid it on the kitchen table like it was as harmless as a grocery list. Nathan sat down, flipping through it with an expression of mild interest, like he was pretending to read while actually hunting for loopholes. He paused. So if you initiate divorce, you keep your premarital assets. I nodded. Yeah, that's normal. It's not personal. He kept reading. I watched his eyes skim past the sections that mattered most, because Evan wrote them in clean, boring language that didn't sound threatening. Nathan finally said, I want one change. I tilted my head. Sure, what? He tapped a paragraph. Add my clause, the one you mentioned. Okay, I said easily. Evan already added it. Nathan's eyebrows lifted. He did? I smiled. Told you it's basic. He signed. Not after a long debate, not after careful consideration. He signed like a man signing a receipt for something he believed he already owned. When his pen lifted from the last page, he slid the documents toward me with a satisfied grin. There, he said. Done. Happy? I took the papers, keeping my hands steady. Yeah, I whispered, meeting his eyes. I'm happy. He leaned in, kissed my forehead, and walked away, humming again, confident, smug, already imagining the day he'd take half of everything I'd built. The second his back turned, I stared down at his signature. And for the first time since I saw those messages, I felt something close to calm. Because now the trap wasn't just planned. It was armed, and Nathan Cole had just handed me the trigger. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of day people say is a good omen. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the bridal suite, glinting off champagne flutes and silk robes, and mirrors polished to perfection. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to. I felt nothing. No nerves, no excitement, no fluttering joy. Just a steady, almost eerie calm. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror. Hair pinned, makeup flawless, white dress draped over a body that had learned how to hold itself together under pressure. Anyone looking at me would have seen a woman about to marry the love of her life. No one could see the weight of the folder locked away in my mind. Nathan was already at the venue, surrounded by his friends. I could picture him clearly, laughing too loudly, soaking up congratulations, enjoying the role of devoted groom. To him, this day wasn't just a wedding. It was the final step in a long con. He thought he was crossing the finish line. The bridesmaids buzzed around me, adjusting my veil, fussing over details. They kept telling me how lucky I was, how handsome Nathan looked, how perfect everything was. I smiled at the right moments, nodded, thanked them. Inside, I was counting down. When the music started, the room shifted. Conversations hushed. Guests rose to their feet. The doors at the back of the aisle opened, and I walked. Every step felt deliberate, measured. As I moved forward, I saw Nathan waiting at the altar, standing tall in his tailored suit, his face arranged into an expression of affectionate awe. He looked exactly like a man in love. But I noticed the details others missed. The tightness at the corners of his smile, the confidence in his posture, the faint gleam of triumph in his eyes. This wasn't nervous joy. This was anticipation. When I reached him, he took my hands, squeezing just a little too firmly, like he was grounding himself before the final act of a performance. You look incredible, he whispered. I looked up at him and thought, you have no idea. The officiant began the ceremony, voice calm and practiced. Words about commitment, partnership, forever. Nathan nodded along, playing his part beautifully. I wondered how many times he'd rehearsed this moment in his head, how he'd stand here, say the right things, then wait patiently for the clock to start ticking. When the question came, he didn't hesitate. Do you, Nathan Cole, take Audrey Wood to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, he said loud and confident. No tremor, no doubt. Then the officiant turned to me. Do you, Audrey Wood, take Nathan Cole? I do, I said, steady as stone. Nathan smiled wider, satisfied. The rings were exchanged. Applause rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. Guests dabbed at their eyes. And when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Nathan leaned in and kissed me like a man who believed he'd already won. The cheers were deafening, but all I could hear was the quiet click of a lock closing. The reception was a blur of speeches, laughter, clinking glasses. Nathan played the attentive husband, arm around my waist, hand warm against my back. He soaked up admiration like fuel. I noticed how he encouraged the extravagance. Go big, he'd whispered during planning. It's our day. We deserve it. Now I watched him enjoy it all, every luxury, every indulgence, like it was already his by right. He didn't know it yet, but this was the last day he'd feel entitled to anything I owned. That night, after the guests had gone and the music faded, Nathan pulled me close. We did it, he murmured. Everything's perfect. I smiled against his chest. Yeah, I said softly. Perfect. Because the papers were signed, the vows were spoken, the rules were locked in. And the game he thought he was playing? It was already over. If anyone had asked, we looked like the kind of couple people envied. The honeymoon was Nathan's idea. 5-star resorts, oceanfront villas, private dinners arranged with a single phone call. He insisted on the best room, the best view, the most expensive wine on the menu. Once in a lifetime, right? He'd said, grinning as he handed over my card without hesitation. I let him. I watched him move through that world like he belonged there, already spending money he believed would soon be half his. He kissed my hand in public. He laughed easily. He posted curated photos online with captions about forever and luckiest man alive. I smiled in every picture. At night, when he thought I was asleep, he would scroll through his phone, messaging friends, sometimes pausing to smirk at something on the screen. I never asked. I didn't need to. I was memorizing patterns now. How he avoided conversations about long-term plans that didn't involve money. How he deflected when I mentioned growing old together. How affection became something he performed, not something he felt. 3 months into our marriage, the cracks began to show. Nathan started picking fights over nothing. Dishes left in the sink, a tone he didn't like, a meeting that ran late. He framed them as concerns, like he was the reasonable one trying to fix a broken dynamic. We're just different people, he'd say, sighing dramatically. I nodded, listening, filing everything away. Then came the jokes. You ever notice how couples change after marriage? Some people rush into things. Financial independence is important, you know, especially if things don't work out. Each comment was a test, a probe. He wanted reassurance, wanted me to panic, wanted me to suggest solutions that benefited him. I gave him none. Instead, I stayed calm, loving, present. The more patient I was, the more restless he became. One evening, we sat across from each other at the dining table, a bottle of wine between us. He'd chosen the setting carefully. Soft lighting, relaxed atmosphere, controlled environment. Audrey, he said gently, can we talk? I looked up, meeting his eyes. Of course. He exhaled like this was hard for him. I just feel like maybe we rushed into this. There it was. I felt a flicker of something in my chest. Not pain, but anticipation. You think so? I asked quietly. He reached for my hand, his expression carefully crafted. I love you. I really do. But sometimes love isn't enough. I let my face soften. Are you saying you're unhappy? He hesitated just long enough to make it look genuine. I think maybe we both deserve space before things get ugly. A pause, then the line he'd been waiting to say. Maybe we should talk about separating. The word hung between us. I stared at him, letting silence stretch, watching the way his fingers tightened around his glass. You mean divorce? I asked. He nodded slowly. I think it's for the best. I lowered my gaze, letting my shoulders slump just slightly, as if something inside me had broken. If that's what you want, I said softly, we can talk to a lawyer. Nathan's relief was almost visible. He tried to hide it, but it leaked through in the faint upward curve of his mouth. Tomorrow, he suggested, a little too quickly. I nodded. Tomorrow. That night, he slept soundly. I didn't, but I wasn't hurting. I was ready. Nathan dressed carefully the next morning. Not the way someone dresses for a difficult conversation, but the way someone dresses for a victory lap. He chose a tailored jacket, expensive watch, polished shoes. He even hummed while adjusting his collar in the mirror, like this was just another errand on his to-do list. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed loosely, my face unreadable. You okay? He asked, glancing at me. You seem quiet. I forced a small smile, just tired. He nodded, satisfied. He didn't ask anything else. The law office was cool and minimalist, all glass walls and muted colors. The kind of place designed to make people feel small if they weren't prepared. Nathan walked in like he owned it. We were led into a conference room where Evan was already waiting. He rose politely, shaking Nathan's hand with calm professionalism. Mrs. Wood, Mr. Cole, Evan said evenly. Nathan smirked. Won't be Mrs. Wood much longer. I almost admired the confidence. We sat. Nathan leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, his body language relaxed, entitled. He assumed this meeting was a formality, the final step before cashing out. Evan opened a thick folder and placed it neatly on the table. So, Evan began, before we proceed, I need to confirm something for the record. He looked directly at Nathan. You are the party initiating this divorce, is that correct? Nathan didn't hesitate. Yes. I felt the air shift. Evan nodded, flipped a page. Very well. Nathan smiled faintly, already imagining numbers. Evan adjusted his glasses. In that case, all terms will be governed by the prenuptial agreement signed prior to the marriage. Nathan waved a hand dismissively. That thing? Audrey already told you. It's just standard. We're not really... Evan raised a finger, polite but firm. It is legally binding. Nathan's smile faltered, just barely. Evan began reading. As outlined in Section 3, if Mr. Cole initiates divorce, he is entitled to no financial compensation, no spousal support, and no claim to any premarital or postmarital assets belonging to Mrs. Wood. Silence. Nathan blinked. Wait, that's not... Evan continued smoothly, as if Nathan hadn't spoken. Furthermore, under Section 5, any proven intent to deceive, manipulate, or defraud Mrs. Wood for financial gain results in a compensatory penalty owed to Mrs. Wood, including coverage of all legal fees. Nathan sat forward now. That's not what we agreed on. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. You should have read it more carefully, I said quietly. His head snapped toward me. Audrey, what is this? Evan slid a set of printed screenshots across the table. Group chat messages, timestamps, names. Nathan's face drained of color. These, Evan said calmly, constitute evidence of premeditated financial fraud. Nathan stood abruptly. This is insane. You can't use private messages. Evan didn't flinch. You consented to digital discovery under the agreement. Your signature is on every page. Nathan turned to me, eyes wide now, not angry, but panicked. Babe, he said, lowering his voice, we need to talk about this. This got out of hand. I met his gaze, steady and cold. No, I said, you got outplayed. His mouth opened, closed. Evan continued, relentless. Additionally, should you contest these terms, Section 7 requires you to cover all legal expenses for both parties. Nathan's hands shook. So, I get nothing? He whispered. Evan nodded. Correct. And the penalty? Nathan asked, voice cracking. Evan named the amount. Nathan sank back into his chair like gravity had suddenly doubled. I stood. Nathan looked up at me, desperate now. Audrey, please, I didn't mean it. It was just talk. Just jokes. I tilted my head slightly. You called me a temporary wife. His face crumpled. I loved you, he whispered. No, I said calmly. You loved what I had. I picked up my purse, turning toward the door. Evan closed the folder with a soft final sound. The sound of an ending. Nathan didn't follow. He couldn't, because in that room, everything he thought he was about to gain vanished. And for the first time since I met him, Nathan Cole finally understood what it felt like to lose. Nathan fought the divorce. Of course he did. He hired a lawyer who promised miracles and billed him by the hour. He filed motions. He argued technicalities. He accused me of manipulation, of emotional abuse, of setting him up. Every accusation sounded hollow, because the prenup didn't care about his feelings. It cared about signatures, timestamps, evidence. The court enforced it exactly as written. Nathan walked away with nothing. No settlement, no support, no claim to my home, my accounts, my future. Worse than that, he owed me money. Legal fees, penalties, costs he never imagined he'd be responsible for. The fallout was brutal. The friends who once hyped him up disappeared first. Brandon stopped replying to texts. Mara quietly blocked him. Lily, his ex, the one who had cheered him on, posted a vague quote about karma and deleted his number. Screenshots leaked. Not by me. By people who suddenly wanted distance from a public embarrassment. Nathan became a cautionary tale, a punchline. The guy who thought he was clever and got dismantled by a woman he underestimated. I heard about the rest secondhand. How he moved out of the condo and into a small rental across town. How his credit cards were maxed. How job interviews stalled once his name was Googled. The man who once joked about securing the bag now worked overtime just to stay afloat. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply moved on. Months passed. The divorce finalized quietly. My life settled into something peaceful again. Routine mornings, steady work, evenings that belonged only to me. I almost forgot about Nathan. Almost. Until one afternoon, I stepped into a coffee shop near my office and saw him sitting alone at a corner table. He looked smaller. Not physically, though he'd lost weight, but diminished. The confidence was gone. The smug ease replaced by tension in his shoulders and dark circles under his eyes. He noticed me at the same moment. For a second, he looked like he might bolt. Then he stood. Audrey, he said softly. I paused. Nathan. Silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. You look good, he said finally. I nodded once. I am. He swallowed. I deserved what happened. I know that now. I studied him, not with anger, not with pity, just clarity. I didn't destroy you, I said calmly. You did that yourself. His eyes glistened. I thought I was being smart. So did I replied. That's the difference. I picked up my coffee and turned toward the door. Audrey, he called after me. I'm sorry. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. You're not sorry, I said evenly. You're just sorry it didn't work. Then I walked out. No dramatic music, no final showdown. Just freedom. Because the truth is, revenge didn't change me. It revealed me. And I finally learned what it felt like to walk away. Not broken, not bitter, but whole.